Thank you, Chris, for those kind words. He did approach me a while back. And when he found out that I worked for Xerox and was involved in the development of Lansdowne, he thought it would be a good idea if I shared my experience and how it all led to the creation of Lansdowne Woods. So I will explain why a Rochester, New York company decided to build a training center in Loudoun County and how that decision evolved into the development of Lansdowne and ultimately Lansdowne Woods. Okay, let's begin. The birth of Lansdowne Woods, or how Xerox met Leesburg. In the 70s, this never would have happened. Anyone who was in Loudoun County in the 50s knows there was very little here. The population of Leesburg was about 2,000 people. The whole county had about 21,000. For the 2 centuries prior, agriculture was the dominant way of life in Loudoun County, and the 20,000 population was relatively constant. That began to change in the early 60s. In 1962, the seeds for Lansdowne Woods were planted. Seed number 1, Xerox in Rochester, New York. Xerox came into prominence in 1959 with the introduction of its 914 copier. The growth was tremendous. The company took off like wildfire. They made money in spite of themselves. There was no organized growth, just growth. Worldwide growth. Xerox partnered with the Rank organization, a film distributor in England, to market the copiers in Europe. Xerox partnered with Fujifilm, also a film distributor, to market the copiers in Japan and Asia. By the end of 1961, Xerox was relevant. Seed number 2, Loudoun County. The Dulles International Airport and the Dulles Access Road both opened in 1962. Initially, Dulles Airport was considered a white elephant, far from DC, few flights. But when the era of the wide-body jets began in 1970, operations grew, and so did the county. Okay, a little bit about me. Went to high school in New Jersey, went to college at the University of Pittsburgh, grad school at Penn State for my MBA in finance, not information technology. And in June 1972, I started my career with Xerox in Rochester, New York. I was a corporate auditor. I audited the inventory control systems in their huge manufacturing facility. I also traveled to audit the sales and service operations in several field branches. But one of the audits conducted by our group, an audit I wasn't part of, was on the Leesburg Training Center, their construction project. One of the recommendations of that audit was to add an on-site construction cost control element to the team. There wasn't anyone watching the dollars on this construction project. The engineers were building the Taj Mahal. I was asked if I would like to be part of that on-site construction team and move to Leesburg. I had a few questions, like, what? Why? Where? The what was to be part of the Xerox real estate division. They had big construction plans. I was told it would be good to be on the ground floor of that. Second question, why? Why would Xerox build a training center? And why in Leesburg? Well, as the Xerox monopoly grew, The company executives wanted to strengthen Xerox's capabilities by training all of its worldwide employees with consistent sales, service, and management training in one location. Xerox selected this area because Dulles Airport provided convenient access for all the Xerox employees around the world. And the students would be self-contained to concentrate on the training. So in 1971, for just shy of $5 million, Xerox bought 2,267 acres of farmland in Loudoun County and began the construction of its International Training Center. $5 million might seem like a bit much, especially for 1971, but not for Xerox, not for what they had in mind. And the 2,267 acres might seem a bit excessive, especially since only 100 acres was being used for the training center. But Xerox wanted to be a good neighbor. They were a big northern monopoly who was moving to the south. It was important to make a good impression and not just be perceived as carpetbaggers. The excessive acres served two purposes. One, to self-contain the students, and two, to buffer the neighboring properties. So I accepted the cost control position and moved from Rochester to Leesburg. When I got here, I was surprised to learn that Leesburg was not named after Robert E. Lee. Good thing. Coming from the cold, populated north, I found this area amazing. Warm weather, no snow, all the way to Thanksgiving. I thought I found the promised land. I was wondering where everybody was. It seemed like no one was here. In the early 70s, Leesburg had about 5,000 people living here. The whole county had about 37. The construction site was the only thing around. The Xerox property and the training center construction site was where Coton Farm used to be. A little background on Coton Farm. In the early 1700s, about 11,000 acres was granted to a tidewater speculator, Thomas Lee. Lee was impressed with the unoccupied land where the Potomac River and Goose Creek came together. He knew that waterways produced transportation for people and commerce, so he made an arrangement to have these acres set aside for him. Thomas Lee had several notable sons. Two of them signed the Declaration of Independence. Francis Lightfoot Lee and Richard Henry Lee. They were the only brothers to sign this document. They both lived in this area. And it was Francis Lightfoot Lee and his brother, Richard Henry Lee, who were responsible for naming Leesburg in honor of their father. By 1796, another son of Thomas Lee, Thomas Ludlow Lee, and his family moved on to this land and named it Coton Farm after their family home in England, Coton Plantation. Let me see if I can work my IT specialties here. There you see the Lansdowne site. Just to the east of our property was Janelia Farm. At the time, it was nothing but cattle. Janelia Farm was owned by Robert and Vinton Pickens. The Pickens home was on the hill near the back of the Janelia Farm overlooking the Potomac River. It's where the Howard Hughes Medical Institute now sits. Robert died in 1978. His wife Vinton passed away in 1993 at the age of 93. In 1941, she was appointed the first chair of the Loudoun County Planning Commission. On her watch, Loudoun County established zoning ordinances that banned billboards. She was also head of the Planning Commission during the construction of the Dulles Airport. Potomac Station was on the right. I'm sorry, it was on the left to the west. Belmont Farm and Ashburn Farm were on the other side of the still rural Route 7. Anyway, training center was constructed. In June of 1974, the doors were open. The center was a new, gated, self-contained education community designated exclusively for the training of Xerox employees in sales, service, and management. The training center employed over 500 people, 200 Xerox, 300 non-Xerox, sat on a 40-acre site, was buffered by a 100-acre campus, but the entire Xerox parcel stretched for 2,267 acres. And at the time, was the only major development around. The training center hosted 14,000 individuals a month and had 265,000 square feet of meeting space, 1,000 guest rooms, game rooms, and an enormous cafeteria on the ground floor with great food. The training campus also had a separate recreation facility with an indoor basketball court, racquetball courts, Olympic-sized pool, tennis courts, softball fields, and the students had over 2,000 acres to hike and explore. Xerox owned both sides of Goose Creek, which was great for hiking. Many students roamed the woods with metal detectors and came up with all kinds of artifacts from the Civil War. The idea was to keep the students self-contained and entertained. The sales and service and management courses were excellent and became renowned. In 1975, after the construction of the training center was complete, I was moved to the Xerox corporate headquarters in Stamford, Connecticut. The big construction plans that enticed me to move from Rochester to Leesburg in the first place were real. I was part of the real estate, the corporate real estate group. We built the new corporate headquarters in Stamford, Connecticut, the Palo Alto Research Center in California, moving our genius techies out of Silicon Valley, built the new Northeast Regional Headquarters, a toner plant in Oklahoma City, and as I'll mention later, Xerox centers. Throughout the 60s and much of the 70s, Xerox operated as a monopoly. Xerox's growth continued to explode. Xerox was now a Fortune top 40. But in 1975, SCM, formerly Smith Corona, the typewriter people, they filed a lawsuit against Xerox. Smith Corona became SCM when they wanted to enter the copier market that was dominated by Xerox. The result of the lawsuit ended Xerox's copier dominance. The Federal Trade Commission ordered Xerox to license its 1,700 patents to others and share Xerox's manufacturing expertise. This was the beginning of the end of Xerox's monopoly. SCM never became a force in the copier market, but Japan did. Canon and Sharp made the best use of the Xerox patents and manufacturing processes. They perfected the manufacturing process and produced high-quality machines. Not like in the 60s when made in Japan or made in China or made in Taiwan had a negative connotation to it. The Japanese companies were dumping their high-quality copiers in the US at very low prices. This new competition put a huge strain on Xerox's market share and cash. Xerox tried several strategies to regain its market share and cash. First strategy, in the late 70s, Xerox put an emphasis on service to compete with Japan's low-cost copiers. The service strategy didn't work. Price was way more important to customers than service. Strategy number two, in the early 80s, with cash still being a major concern, Xerox significantly cut costs, 10% cuts, both in spending and employees, every year for 3 years. Third strategy, we're in the mid-80s. President of Xerox was insistent that Xerox was here to stay and wanted to make a statement by putting a stake in the ground. That stake was a high-rise Xerox office building in their major markets. We built Xerox centers in major markets like Dallas, LA, Toronto, New Orleans, still trying to reduce costs and make a statement. The idea of the Xerox Center was to get out of all the leased Xerox office spaces in that city, consolidate them all into one high-rise building, build it twice as big as we needed it, partner with a developer to build the high-rise building, and rent out the other half, which would pay for the mortgage, which was financed by Xerox, and Xerox would also get the tax breaks. That strategy was working pretty good. Until Black Friday in October 1987. Xerox lost the tax breaks with the new tax policies, and the Xerox centers lost their tenants because of the resulting recession. As market share and the cash situation worsened, a fourth strategy evolved: sell off the assets. It was at this point I became part of a newly created Xerox Realty Corporation. It was a wholly owned subsidiary of Xerox, created to dispose of Xerox assets, and that included the Xerox centers and land. The Xerox centers were sold to the companies that we partnered with to build them in the first place, and land. The most attractive saleable land asset was the 2,267 acres surrounding the Leesburg Training Center. The initial idea was to just sell the land as undeveloped farmland, but we saw the success of Reston and Columbia, Maryland, and we were able to convince Xerox management that it would be more lucrative to rezone the property and sell the land in parcels to corporations and residential developers. The site was well positioned. Commercial and residential construction was just beginning in eastern Loudoun. Besides being nearer to Washington, eastern Loudoun was also closer to Dulles Airport, which was a big factor in many corporate relocation decisions. The airport attracted new business, workers, and their families to the county. Metropolitan DC was also experiencing rapid growth. Major road improvements made commuting from Loudoun County much easier, attracting more and more people to the eastern part of Loudoun County. From the 50s to the 80s, the population of Loudoun County tripled. Among the new upcoming projects in Loudoun County was the shopping mall on by 7 and 28. Ted Lerner did that. He was the one who did Tyson's Corner, the Tyson's Corner Mall. Just 10 miles south was the Center for Innovative Technology, which was expected to attract commercial development up the 28 corridor. British Aerospace built a big facility by 28 and Waxpool Road. George Washington University was right at the top of 28. We thought 28 was going to be a corporate corridor, and it would extend into Leesburg. All signs supported commercial growth in Eastern Loudon. So in 1985, the idea was to create a new development community around the training center. The idea looked very promising. So we rezoned the 2,267 acre site and named our new development project Potomac Park. The initial plan for Potomac Park had 12.5 million square feet of office space. As many as 20 corporate office sites were planned for this thing. 127,000 square feet of retail space, a 305-room executive conference resort and golf course, and 1,000 residential units. So as development began, let me see if I can do this. And so as development began, we started building roads. You see the black roads up there? These were the first roads built. Just for your edification, this is the old, where the training center was, and there was a lazy road leading up to it. We were developing on this side. We built the roads, and we put in our development office. Our development office is right there. It's at the corner of Riverside and Lansdowne Boulevard. It's where the SunTrust, now Truist, now sits. That used to be where I used to work. And we got the rezoning. And as part of the rezoning, Xerox agreed to build 2 interchanges on Route 7 to handle all the traffic from all the commercial that was going to be happening, and build a bridge over Goose Creek. That was part of a new road to run parallel to Route 7. Take some of the pressure off of Route 7. And we were to reserve land for the county for a fire and rescue station and for 3 schools. The heavy commercial development expected to be attracted to the Route 28 corridor did not happen. Construction of the Lerner Dulles Mall, which got the county approval in 1987, was delayed again and again. Construction finally began in 1998 when they landed their first anchor, Hex, now Macy's. Our project got off to a slow start. A new project manager was brought on board. One of his first tasks was to change the image of Potomac Park and change the name of Potomac Park. He was looking for a softer, more soothing name than Potomac Park. The new project manager was from Boston. He was a Boston Red Sox fan. He was the one who renamed the project. For those baseball fans here, I think you know where this is headed. When you hit a home run over the Green Monster, that big, tall, green left field wall in Fenway Park, that home run lands on Lansdowne Street. Unfortunately, I was a Yankee fan, but I didn't have a say in the matter. At the same time of the real estate slowdown and the credit crunch caused by the 1987 recession, Xerox headquarters was looking for someone to take Lansdowne off its hands. Enter VMS Realty Partners. VMS was a real estate investment company out of Chicago. VMS wanted to buy the whole Lansdowne project. It was VMS who purchased the land for and built the Lansdowne Conference Resort. But the recession caused foreclosures and heavy debt problems for VMS, and that just didn't go through for them. Benchmark took over the Conference Resort. Besides the training center, Xerox also was being entertained by the Japanese. We had we had an arrangement with Fuji Xerox. There was a connection there. And they were interested in this area right here. They wanted to buy that 600 acres and put in a university. They bought 600 acres, paid us $40 million for it. And they planned to establish an international university. The goal of the Japanese investors was to improve cultural and educational relations between Japan and the US through a 2,000 student school known as the Washington International University of Virginia. But that too never came to fruition because the investors were unable to secure the needed financing. One of the early parcels sold, besides the conference resort, was this parcel right here. Lincoln Properties bought a property and just put a speculative professional building in there, but it filled quickly because it was filled with all of our consultants, our zoning attorney, our land planner, our engineers. They filled that building up quick. Another successful early purchase was right here, and it's still here, Iridium. You may have noticed it. Iridium is a global satellite communications company. Back then, cell phones were just coming on the scene. And their job was to put the satellites up for the cell phones. They joint ventured with Motorola and they launched 66 satellites. And we were just amazed by the whole thing. And that being part of Lansdowne, we were quite proud. By the way, we found out later that the life of a satellite is 20 years. So in 2017, those 50 or 60 guys that worked there, they swapped out all 66 satellites. So Lansdowne was beginning to change the face of Loudoun County at that time. In an area covering about 10% of the county, half the population is now living in eastern Loudoun. By 1990, the county had 86,000 people, and the population of Leesburg was up to 16,000. Because of that shift to eastern Loudoun, we made a concerted effort to track the Loudoun Hospital out of Leesburg and Loudoun County government out of Leesburg. There was a little bit of resistance, especially from the folks from western Loudoun. Our good neighbor's standing was in jeopardy. We were, however, successful with the hospital, mainly because of the decision to keep the original one in downtown Leesburg. We were not successful with the county government coming to Lansdowne. Loudoun County government was to stay in Leesburg, with the new government building being built in downtown Leesburg. Had the county government deal actually happened, the site most likely would have been where Lansdowne Woods, Ashley, and the Vistas currently sit. So we now realize that our initial rezoning plan was way too commercially heavy. To make Lansdowne more realistic to the changing market conditions, in 1984, Xerox Realty prepared a revised land use plan and rezoned Lansdowne from a 12.5 million square foot commercial office, 1,000 residential concept to 6 million commercial and 5,000 residential. The plan included a special zoning category for a 90-acre, 10-building high-rise, 2,000 resident adult retirement community. I say 90 acres. The 90 acres is the whole 90 acres. Enter IDI. We worked very closely with IDI during the special zoning process. Our meetings were in our development office, where the SunTrust Bank is. If you drive up that driveway, which you can't anymore, our huge first-class conference room was on the left. Huge cherry wood conference table filled the room, 15 executive chairs. And we met with owner Giuseppe Cecchi. Norman Dreyfus was his lead negotiator, and Pat Rhodes, the project manager. Once the zoning was approved, we started purchase negotiations. It was a scene from The Godfather. Cecchi would sit quietly in the background in his expensive Italian custom-made suit. We, of course, initially wanted IDI to buy, 43 acres. We needed the cash. To minimize any risk to IDI, Cecchi didn't want to buy anything up front. Cecchi wanted to buy all the units. Cecchi wanted all the units to be pre-sold before he would buy or build anything. The negotiations went back and forth, which was interesting because Norm would be the negotiator, and then when something was posed, he would look back at Cecchi sitting in the back. Cecchi would. It was like there were cheat signals in Vegas. Finally, IDI agreed to build a sales office up front, now known as Overlook. But they would not build building one, or should I say, the first half of building one, until they had pre-sold at least 75% of the units. The sales office only had floor plans and a model. I gotta say that whoever they were selling to, the prospects, were buying on a great leap of faith. They purchased a unit basically sight unseen. They were truly pioneers of Leisure World and Lansdowne Woods. By the way, excuse me, we are blessed to have one of those pioneers here with us tonight, Memory Porter. Riverbend came on board in 1998. Blue Ridge came on board in 2001. Magnolias in 2004. Potomac Ridge in 2005. And finally, Riverview in 2008. As you all know, Leisure World renamed its development Lansdowne Woods of Virginia, changing its name as a retirement community to an active community. Since the development began over 20 years ago, the shift has taken place in the way residents live. About a third of the residents are still actively engaged in business, consulting, and charities. Today, Lansdowne Woods is one of the 5 largest age-restricted communities in Virginia. From the beginning, Xerox always intended Lansdowne to be a high-quality development, consistent with the image Xerox always tried to maintain for itself. We knew early on that after all the parcels were sold, there would be 1,000 acres of common area remaining, the roads, the parks, the river, Goose Creek. We wanted Lansdowne to stay a high-quality community. So we implemented the concept of a conservancy. The conservancy was structured to ensure controlled development and design standards and enforce covenants to maintain the beauty of the community and maintain Lansdowne's property values. The conservancy would be responsible for maintaining all public spaces within the community. Lansdowne Woods is represented in the Lansdowne Conservancy. The Lansdowne Conservancy governs the entire Lansdowne development through a board of directors with representatives from all the property owners and the homeowners associations. Lansdowne Woods, the hospital, the conference resort, the National Conference Resort, which used to be the training center, numerous medical professional buildings like Jack Kent Cook and the Prison Fellowship and Iridium, and the residential homeowners associations. Lansdowne on the Potomac has an HOA over here. This is all residential. That's Lansdowne on the Potomac. Lansdowne Woods of Virginia is represented there. This is now residential, not commercial like it was originally zoned. And the third HOA representative on the Conservancy is Lansdowne Village Greens. That's the residences that are around the town center. Again, the primary role of Lansdowne Conservancy was to ensure controlled development and design standards, as well as enforce covenants to maintain the beauty of Lansdowne and its property values. The Conservancy is responsible for all maintenance of all public spaces within Lansdowne. I believe Lansdowne sets the standards for beautiful, functional, quality, spacious places to live and play and work. I might be biased. The 12,000 people living here in the 4 square miles of Lansdowne enjoy beautifully landscaped streets, public spaces, golf courses, river views, forested areas, ponds, walking paths. The Potomac Heritage Trail runs through Lansdowne. Lansdowne is the home of Belmont Ridge Middle School, Riverside High School, Selden's Landing Elementary School, sitting in the Colton section of Lansdowne. I'm proud of what Lansdowne has become. After my 25 years with Xerox, I'm so happy and grateful to have returned and be a part of this beautiful and friendly community. I thank you. Thanks. I would love to entertain any questions you may have. No questions? Come on.
Where did Leisure World come into this? How did they come and go?
They were,
The question. The question was, where does Leisure World come into play? How did they come and go?
the first I heard of Checky was when he was building Watergate. After Watergate, he got involved with Leisure World in Maryland and had success there. And then he had some successes outside the DC area. And he had foresight, I gotta give him it. And he saw what was happening out here and had a vision. And he came out here and he convinced us, and we went to the county for the rezoning. And we worked with him, as tough as a negotiator as he was. And the end result was a product I'm very happy to be part of.
Sir.
Yes,
When did you say that IDI came on into this process?
it was around, the first we saw them was late 1993.
93.
Yeah,
So that process took from 93 till the start of construction.
right. First it was 93. We wanted to catch his vision. We wanted to incorporate the vision into a master plan. We took that master plan to the county and had to get a special rezoning for the area for the adult retirement community. It wasn't zoned residential at the time. We had to rezone it. Then when we got the rezoning in 1994, of course, we wanted them to buy the land right away, but Checky is too smart for that.
Hey,
Yeah,
I think you give us more credit, pioneers, than we deserve. I put money down to buy a unit in 1996. I don't think we knew what you just described, that it was as tenuous as you described, that if they didn't have enough people to buy it, the whole thing would have fallen through. We just were assured it was going to be built.
of
And my
course,
husband and I didn't know what our view would be from our apartment on the 7th floor in the second half of River Bend. So So we went over to the Lansdowne Resort and asked the bellhop to take us up to a comparable level to make sure we could see the river. So we decided we wanted a higher level, so we got an 11th floor apartment in River Bend. But in '96, we didn't know anything about all these directions.
That's a leap of faith. You may have recalled, when we did this rezoning for this 90 acres, it was for 10 high-rise buildings. There were to be high-rise over here, but Chucky realized it would have blocked the view of the buildings that he had built first, so he decided not to do that.
The residents realized it, and they went to the county.
Maybe that's how he realized it.
Legal action. Yeah. A number of residents were organized and went and testified before the board. And Chucky backed off.
Wow.
Yes,
Was it the county that decided to move the hospital out here, or was it a private corporation, a private group?
I thought we were dealing with the county.
Lansdowne Woods, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry,
Was it the county that decided to move the hospital out?
yes.
Okay.
And there was resistance because had it been the only hospital, the folks from Western Loudon would have a long way to go. So they decided to keep the original hospital where it is. And when we built the hospital in the beginning for the pioneers, it was nothing like the hospital you're looking at now. The hospital that was first built was just the first phase. There was none of the medical buildings around it. It wasn't a parking garage, it was the parking lot. But I give credit to the pioneers. Yes, sir.
Hi, a few years ago, actually 2018, River Bend celebrated its 20th anniversary. And that was a big deal around here. And we had a big event here as well in this room, filled the whole room. And county representatives and everybody were here. And that was a really wonderful event for many of us. Now it's time for Blue Ridge to celebrate. And I was asked what kind of information we have, and I found a video that was put together by Jack Kelly on YouTube. And it really is in interviews with Pat Rhodes as well as with, I don't know, 15 or so of the originals that moved into River Bend. And it's quite wonderful to see that again. And I saw that yesterday when I was going through it and giving information to Blue Ridge about what they might look at in their celebration time. And so I recommend that. Go on YouTube and look up that 20th anniversary celebration for River Bend that Jack Kelly put together. It's really quite awesome.
I did see that. Jack shared that with me, and that's how I discovered memory.
I'm curious as to how many acres there are in Lansdowne Woods proper.
43.
43. Does that include like the woods behind us up to Woodbridge?
Up to where the golf course is. In the back?
Within the fences?
Yes, but I'm curious as to why you asked.
Just to clarify, what's owned by the Conservancy and what's owned by Lansdowne Woods?
Yes. It's well defined by property lines. I'm not exactly sure where the property lines are, but if the property line is on the Lansdowne Woods sides, then it's the Lansdowne Woods Conservancy that takes care of that property.